Hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews. We're here today to talk about a very important film, Shaun of the Dead. Do you know why this film is important, Chris?
Why? Why, Dad?
Because this is going to be a slightly special Rewind Reviews. Just very slightly. Because there's something, Chris, you're not familiar with. A fact about where I live.
Oh, yeah. Was Shaun of the Dead filmed near it?
Well, Chris, the Winchester is a 7-minute walk from my house.
Oh, really? Oh, nice.
So, we're going on a trip.
All right.
So, for the first 10, 20 minutes of the podcast, I'm mobile.
Right, as you walk to the Winchester.
Why not? The plot of the movie is about getting to the Winchester. I'm going to the Winchester.
Yeah. What, and then you're going to come back?
I need to, because all the triv is on the laptop that I'm definitely not taking with me.
I mean, you know that a podcast is a primarily audio-based medium, yeah?
Yeah, I do know that, Chris.
That from the point of view of me and the listener, you're just going to be walking outside.
I'll take a picture, put it in the video version.
Good.
I just think that's a fun idea.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
And
I've been wanting you to fuck off for years, so this is,
Right.
a rare treat for me.
Like, I'm lifting up the microphone. I'm holding the microphone. Now, I've got my microphone. It corroded where the batteries go, so I'm powering the microphone right now from like a power brick. I'm hoping this is gonna work. I've got my keys. I know. Go on.
Like, for people that don't know, this is day 2 of 2 days of podcasts, and we've got like a hard deadline for today. And Dan's going mobile, which we've never done in 11 years.
Look, mate. All right, I'm in the corridor of my flat, and that's louder than I anticipated. So let me just get outside. Right, I'm in the great outdoors, Chris.
Well, this is nothing but static, and Rewind Reviews goes wild.
Goes insane, yeah. Well, it's just one of those things where I walk past it on my way back from work, basically. I'd say, so depending on whether I get the train or the bus. If I get the bus home because it's late, then I walk past the Winchester every time. Now, very sadly, it's no longer the Winchester. So it wasn't ever the Winchester. The Winchester as a name was for the film, specifically for the film. The way it worked was it was a pub at the time called the Duke of Albany, and they rebranded it the Winchester for the film, because obviously the whole idea of the Winchester, the gun. And then in 2005, it went out of business, very sadly, and it was shut for about 3-4 years. In 2009, it reopened as a residential thing. Now, the bottom of the building has been completely reworked. It doesn't look like the Winchester anymore at all, but the top half of the building is identical. Looks exactly like it did back then. And as I said, it's about 7 minutes from my house. Go on.
So it's not a pub at all now, then?
Not a pub at all. People live there now, which is so weird. Imagine that. Where do you live? Live at the Winchester? So, while I'm walking, let's, and hopefully, it's going to look a bit weird if anyone comes by. I'm hoping it's early enough that I'm not going to get too many weird lucky loos. People just like, what are you doing walking down the street with a microphone, talking to yourself?
No.
I mean, I've got right, so here we are.
That sort of thing is so common now as well, isn't it? Though?
Yeah, I don't know. It's quite a big... I mean, our microphones are quite big. They're not subtle. But yeah. But anyway, let's talk about the film, Chris, because we're, times are ticking. Let's be efficient.
Yeah, why not?
So we'll talk about Shaun of the Dead. This is I think it's one of those films where this came out a little bit later than a lot of the films we've done on this podcast. So this isn't like a very young, influential film. But for me, this is one that I got hold of while I was in... So in the UK, we have like high school, then we have 2 years of like college, and then we have university. So when I was in college, I did a film and TV production course, and this is one of those films that I think around that time, like everyone was handing around. It was a lot of sharing of films. It was like, oh, you've got to watch this one, you've got to watch this one, and it was a lot of that. So I'm pretty sure I hadn't seen Spaced, I don't believe. so I was out of the loop with, Edgar Wright, Nick Frost, Simon Pegg's work, and then I got handed this movie on DVD. Maybe it was towards the end of high school. You know what? It might have been.
It came out when we were. It came out in 2004, which means you and I were 15, 16.
That's right on the cusp of going from high school to college, isn't it? When do you go to college? What year? Like, how old are you usually when you go to college?
You go to college is sixth form, isn't it? So it's 16. It's 17, 18. You're in college.
It's somewhere around there. Then someone handed me this DVD. I mean, I wouldn't know exactly, but it was either as I was getting into or just about leaving high school. Someone hands me the DVD and shares it, and blew me away. Obviously, started looking into them, found out about Spaced, also blew me away. Became a big fan, and then obviously from Hot Fuzz onwards, watched all of Edgar Wright's movies in the cinema. He's one of my favourite directors now, and obviously still a big fan of Simon Pegg and all the guys that worked on this. So I don't have a huge amount of this doesn't have the same level of personal investment as a Clerks, where it was actually a factor in me choosing to study film and TV before I then went on to uni to study screenwriting, and it's not quite the nostalgia of a Turtles, where it's a very influential part of my youth, my young youth, a thing I loved. So yeah, I'm sort of. I love this film dearly, but it doesn't have the same personal connection other than just it's one of those great films I saw when I was younger and will have had an influence on me, I'm sure, but that's kind of my history with it. How about you then? Do you have anything particular in your sort of history with the film?
No, it's very similar. It was the kind of film that I remember getting handed to me, watching. And then I'm pretty sure I then said to my mum and dad about it and watched it again with them. So it's kind of that film that you go, oh no, we'll watch this together. I want to watch it again. I think they'll enjoy it. So yeah, I remember. I vaguely remember watching it with them and watching it on my own. But I do think as well it's interesting because as much as because like you say, we were a little bit older and it's just fundamentally a brilliant movie. I do think it's more it's been, and I think this is the case for you too, more rewatchable than a lot of those films usually are. I've seen this film a bunch. I watch it every couple of years. We rewatched the whole Cornetto trilogy last year, I think, and before that I would have rewatched it. It's a real, I think for our generation, it's a real throw it on and Shaun of the Dead. Especially from England, I think that I don't know if that's necessarily true of the average person our age in America, but that's definitely true of anyone in this country that's our age. And we'll get there if we get there at some point. But it's weird because I think,
mate, hopefully I'll fucking get there. I'm only a few minutes away now. Come on.
I think people feel that way about Hot Fuzz. You don't hear that a lot for The World's End. I've started trying. If we watch, Hot Shaun of the Dead and then it tends to now lead to us watching the other two as well. But I feel like World's End doesn't get as much love. But yeah,
no, I love that movie as well. I think World's End. I think you're right. World's End doesn't get as much love, and I really don't know why, because it's probably, technically speaking, it's the best movie. In terms of the actual filmmaking, because you can see these three movies are a really good, watch a person learn how to do it. Watch a person learn how to make films, and he just did the progression of Edgar Wright's filmmaking from this to World's End. It's remarkable, and you can see the signs of his brilliance here as well. But yeah,
for those that don't realise, if there is anyone, well, first of all, stop and go watch Shaun of the Dead. But Shaun of the Dead is it's part of the Cornetto trilogy, which are films directed by Edgar Wright, starring Nick Frost and Simon Pegg. Usually about them playing different duos in different scenarios.
Usually co-written with Simon Pegg. I should clarify as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe
Nick Frost writes on them as well, doesn't he?
I don't think Nick Frost wrote. Well, he certainly didn't write on this one. I don't know if he got the writing credit on the next two, but Nick Frost definitely didn't write on this one. This was This was Simon Pegg, Edgar Wright.
Oh yeah, no, all three is just Pegg and Wright. You're right.
Mm-hmm. So I have arrived. I am looking at the Winchester. So let's see. So I am currently standing on the corner where that phone booth was. That is not there anymore. Sadly, it's been demolished. I can actually see across the road. Oh, this is quite fun. So there's a building in the background on one of the shots that's got green fronting to it. That's now been repainted red. So I'm stood where they battle all the zombies.
So all of it's residential then now, including the bottom?
Yes, which is the bottom has been heavily redesigned. So the bottom is no longer that round look. There's an empty lot across the street from it on the left-hand side that is now also residential housing. But yeah, I'm looking straight out. Let me get some pictures. And you can see.
We need you in the photo, like full-on selfie, tourist-style selfie.
100%. Well, I'll get a photo or two. Oh, I'm in the road, and there's a car coming. I'm gonna move. But yeah, let's do it. Let me get a photo. I worked out as well. I tested that I'd be able to take a photo while we were on this call before doing this.
And is it residential? Is it quite affluent residential? Do we know, or do we know what kind of residential area it is?
No, I mean it looks like flats, but the windows at the bottom are huge. The windows on the ground level are massive. So if you lived there, I mean, I don't know, but yeah, you'll see from the pictures once I send them over. But let me just reposition myself so I'm in the picture. This is weird, by the way. I don't know if anyone's noticed. This is a strange thing for us to be doing. I can't get the picture right because it keeps trying to focus on me, and therefore the building gets washed out.
Just do the building if need be. Then.
1 second. It's lovely though. It's a really nice building. Wait, let me see if I've got a picture that's usable. Yeah, that'll do. So yeah, it's really cool. So a lot of it's changed. You can see what they did was they used a back garden from another house, and then to create the moment where they sort of hop the fence. To hop the fence to get to the bit where the place is crowded, they've you can sort of see they've the way they've sort of cheated it, because it's like a park. I need to drop my phone. That wouldn't be good. Well, I suppose better the phone than the mic. That would be one or the other, if that's what we're playing. Yeah, I think I've got a couple of pictures here. I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where, like, looking at this now, it's so strange because you can see how it all came together. But it's so yeah. So there's the building that they shuffle past, which I'm stood across from now, which is one where the scene where they're pretending to be zombies to get away with it. I'm stood next to that building. I'm also looking down the street where they do the no. That's actually a road now, where it was more like a side road in the movie. That's become a full road since then. So I'm literally stood where they're stood, looking down the street, doing the no. If I move along, I'm now stood where Simon was stood in the scene where he comes along the side of the pub and the two people are kissing, and he gets angry. He's got the flowers.
Yeah.
So I got a couple of pictures. I guess I will leave it at that. But it's a really cool thing to do. Yeah, and it's interesting because the buildings across from it haven't changed at all, except for the front of the building that's painted green in the movie is painted red here. That part hasn't changed at all, but the actual side that the Winchester is on, sadly, has changed quite a bit. So yeah, it doesn't. I'll be honest with you, I don't think it looks particularly like fancy residential at all. I think it looks kind of like, reasonably affordable for what it is. It doesn't look like it's like they've really tarred it up to try and make it like a you must be very rich to live here sort of thing. I mean, my area isn't that rich of an area, to be honest. I live, this is for anyone who's looked this up. It's in New Cross Gate, which is not far from Peckham. You can draw your own conclusions if you know anything about London's boroughs in terms of pricing.
Yeah, but Peckham's like the big example of the area that's been gentrified.
Yes,
it's probably mainly a big example for that because it's so not how it was portrayed, thanks to things like Only Fools and Horses.
Right, and I think it's changed a lot. I mean, so Peckham and then Deptford, the borough over, or the little town over, have both had huge amounts of change, but not the whole areas. They've both, they're still a little bit, there's still a good mix. You see a lot of like graffiti. This is like "fuck gentrification" and stuff like that, which is funny. So there we go. We've been to the Winchester. I'm starting my route back, and then it'll be normal podcast from there. But I just thought it'd be fun.
Are you gonna fully commit then? You've gone to the Winchester. Are you gonna have a pint?
Oh man, I would love to have a pint, but the Winchester is very much not serving.
No, I mean but you could get one at home, Dan.
I could get one at home. I'll see what I've got in my fridge. I don't know what I've got beer-wise at the moment.
I really love the idea of you having a pint at 9 a.m.
Well, went in the Winchester. But yeah, no.
Exactly.
Like I said, the plan was if the movie is about that, we'll make the podcast about that too. We've achieved it very quickly. It was a very reasonable goal.
We've achieved our goals.
Yeah.
Arguably, we've achieved it quicker than they achieved it in the movie.
I'd say, by about an hour and 23 minutes, we've achieved it. So, with that all in mind, the film.
So
we're recommending it, obviously.
Yes. Yeah, I think for those that haven't seen it, as before we get into spoilers, absolutely go and see Shaun of the Dead. It's a classic. It absolutely holds up. I think this is another example, Dan. I'm going to say it. I think this is another example of a perfect movie.
Yeah, it's pretty close, isn't it? I don't think there's a lot I wrote down in my notes that was negative. I don't think at all, really.
No.
God, I think I'd have to really think to come up with too many criticisms of this film. So I guess, listeners, please be ready for another hour of gushing. So for those who don't remember the plot exactly, we follow Shaun, who is conveniently, his name is in the title of the movie, so I can't forget it. Who is the other characters, on the other hand? Shaun and Ed, I always remember the names of. I always forget the names of every other character in this movie, almost exclusively. So Shaun is basically sort of stuck in his little rut where he's got his very boring day job, and he goes to the same pub every night with his same useless slacker mate that he's had since high school, or maybe even younger, and his girlfriend is basically he's dumping him because he's not doing anything to change his life. A zombie apocalypse happens, and he decides the safest place for them to be is that same pub that they visit every night, which is why they end up in the situation where it's about getting to the Winchester, but through a zombie apocalypse. The first thing I always note about this film is how great the first act is. It's amazing, the setup, how quickly you understand the character dynamics, how quickly you understand the problem, that Liz... Oh, I remembered her name. That Liz has with Shaun. It's immediate how much you get where she's coming from. But at the same time, you feel for him because he's so hapless. And all the way while that's happening, the movie's doing all these great, subtle zombies are coming things that are all really, really clever. Very, very subtle. It starts what is a running joke through the first act of the movie of Shaun not noticing things obviously being weird and shitty around him because he's so obsessed and sort of so stuck in his own little world. And I think that's such a fun way to open the movie, and it's all shot really well, and the dialogue is so tight, particularly in the first act. Like the amount of there isn't a word wasted. That first scene alone in the Winchester, wow! I was like, this dialogue is bouncing all over the place. It's so sharp. It's great.
And it uses techniques that are now very commonplace, and other movies had done them, but the reveals, the slow reveal what is Nick's... I'm doing it now, and I've got the thing open in front of me.
Ed.
Bear with. Ed, yeah. All right. Yeah, they're talking, and then they're talking about Ed, and then it cuts to Ed, and then she talks about Simon talks about... Shaun talks about Liz's friends, and we swing round and cut to them and stuff, and it's just so... it's very much building on the camera techniques and the kind of filming techniques that were used by Pegg and Wright in Spaced, but it's elevating them, and it's so effective, as you say, for getting to know the characters. And there's just so many, in terms of setting up who Shaun is, I think just one of the movie's biggest strengths is it's one of the best and cleanest character arcs in a film. Like Shaun's journey, and Shaun's journey of like. It's not that he's incapable at the beginning. It's just like he doesn't have the he's choosing to sort of not do these things. He's making his life decisions, and actually seems to be okay with complacency. Basically, seems to be okay with being complacent. And then that over the course of the movie, through various things that happened in terms of the zombie apocalypse, through the emotion of his stepdad dying, he becomes not okay with complacency, and he's the one that wants to spring into actions, and he's the one that comes up with the plans and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think
really. Yeah, go on.
Well, I was just saying, what's really clever about that is that even when he starts coming up with plans, the plans aren't any better. He's not more capable. He doesn't switch a button and become more capable. His plans are terrible. The point isn't... Yeah. The point of the movie is so clear, and the reason the art comes across is because it's not about him learning to be good at life. It's about him trying. Just do something. Yeah. She says it right at the start of the movie. Do something. Doing something. And the point of the movie is... his plan to go to the Winchester is awful, and it gets all of his friends and family killed, except for him and his girlfriend.
Especially considering especially Liz and her friends, because they were arguably a lot safer where they were.
Yes,
because it was high rise, and there's Shaun himself couldn't get up there easily.
Yep.
Which would suggest that the zombies would have struggled. There's been no evidence of them climbing particularly.
Yeah, exactly. 1 second, I'm back in the hallway. So I'm going to be slightly quieter, because for some reason hallways in these apartment buildings in flats, but apartment buildings for listeners in America, in the UK, in London particularly, for some reason the hallways are designed to create sound tunnels that disturb everyone. I don't know why. Okay, I'm back in my home. Hello, home. Oh, the cat's been let out. I'm going to assume that means Nadia's about. Oh, there's Nadia. Hi, Nadia. Say hello to our listeners.
Hello.
There you go. That's Nadia, everyone. I'm heading back in to record now. Wait, here we go.
Or as we like to call her on the podcast, Nadia.
1 second.
Real. I don't know why I've started doing that. That's only in like the last 6 months. I've started, whenever I say Nadia's name, giving it some real, like...
emphasis.
Stank. It's really weird.
Emphasis in the right places.
Nadia.
Yeah. 1 second. Let me very carefully remove the battery pack that the mic is being powered by from my pocket. I tell you what, Chris, I didn't mention this, but the amount of testing I've had to do the last few days to make sure this could be done.
Well, it was worth it, Dan. It was good. It was good fun.
I had to... Because at first I was like, well, the big problem here is going to obviously be, phone signal, bit of testing to make sure I had a good signal from point A to point B. Then I was like, all right, what's the next problem? Well, it's not, the microphone will be easy to carry. It has a little handle. Oh, the handle snapped immediately. Cool. I need to glue that back together. And then it was like, what's the next thing I got to do? Oh, we're going to make sure I've got battery power. No problem. This thing takes batteries. That'll be easy. I open it up, realize I left batteries in there, and they corroded a hole through part of the plastic on the microphone. And the little spring when you're putting a battery in. Yeah, that corroded and broke away and was just dust. So
is this the one you had when we did the Comic-Con, or has that happened to a second mic?
No, this is that one. This is that one. But it's
I should probably check mine, because my batteries have been in there a while. I should check that.
Yeah, you're not supposed to leave the batteries. You're supposed to take the batteries out. But it's one of those things where I think our logic was, if we have a power cut, the battery would kick in. So we left batteries in there. That was the initial thinking, but yeah, it doesn't really work. It doesn't work now, sadly, because if you leave it in too long, the batteries will just corrode and ruin it. So I couldn't even use it by batteries. I was like, well, then I'm fucked. I can't do it. We can't go to the Winchester. And then I realised what I could do. I've got one of those charge packs used for a phone. It's a little box that you can charge up and plug it in. And I was like, it's USB. I could run the mic off that, couldn't I? And I did. And it worked, and I tested last night. I let it run for 2 hours just to see how long the battery pack would last. It went for 2 hours last night, Chris, without going down from its full charge. So I was like, that's
nice.
definitely enough power. So here we are. So, a little jaunt. I'll send you a pic, Chris, of me outside the Winchester. Have I got a pic? I must have. I hope I got a pic. I'll send you that in a sec, and you can have a glance and go. There's that bell end that said we'd make this quick, and then didn't.
I still think it will be quick though, because and it's not a cop out. Genuinely, the movie's just fucking brilliant, and it's not entertaining to hear us repeat scenes that we enjoyed and go, "This was really funny, wasn't it?" So a lot of it is about how cleverly constructed the story is, and that motif of Shaun just doing something and the changes he goes through. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's these episodes are always these episodes are usually what makes Rewind reviews concise is if it's a comedy, because we don't want to just be repeating jokes, and if it's a really good movie, and this is both of those things.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So let's get into. So we talked a little bit about Shaun's arc, and I think what I said was, what we were saying before I arrived back at the flat and had to get a bit quieter. That idea that it's not about. I think zoning in on it's not about him being capable, just about him trying, is actually a really interesting thing, because I don't think I've ever seen a movie do that before. That idea of it's not about him being good at something. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's like success isn't the point. And usually a movie equates growth and success as the same. Like, being good at the thing. It's such a rare plot line for a film to do. Such a rare approach to storytelling. I can't think of another example of it. Can you? It's almost like an anti-story. It's like, no, we don't need the hero to be good at stuff. No. So it's just about him being, giving some. So and I will say, as a theme, that sort of runs through all of these movies. There's a lot of, people not growing up is a running theme throughout all three Cornetto films, I think. People stuck in the past, and here it's his friendship with Ed that's that. But I think that's represented most clearly in World's End, where it's about a guy that literally won't grow up and move on. But I think that is a theme throughout all of these movies, and it's interesting to note that theme goes away once Edgar Wright moves on from his partnership with Simon Pegg and starts making his own movies, which makes me think one of two things. Either they just said that all they needed to say on that subject and they were both ready to move on from that, or there is that possibility that was coming more from Pegg than Wright in the writing. So yeah, I don't know for sure, but that is a thought that I had. So yeah, I don't know if
it's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously Ed is a real interesting point here, because Ed literally doesn't change. Like, and we're just in full spoiler territory now. Ed becomes a zombie and fundamentally doesn't change. But what changes is Shaun is going to him, and just going to him for a bit and still seeing him. But him and Liz have got this whole other, they're seemingly living together at the end. They've got this whole other plan for the day, which isn't, it isn't an extraordinary plan. They're not doing a lot of stuff. They're just kind of hanging out together. You get the feeling it's a, lazy Sunday and stuff. But Ed literally doesn't change. So it's not even like that. And Liz doesn't really, no other character does. Well, I suppose only really Shaun and Liz surviving by the end, but no other character changes. And because the movie doesn't need everyone to change, it doesn't need everyone to have an arc. It's very much centered on Shaun. And I think, for Ed, that's okay. He doesn't need to change. Maybe to some degree, he to some degree, he doesn't even really sacrifice himself at the end. He gets bitten, and he just sort of accepts that.
Right, and I think what's interesting though as well about that is obviously, he doesn't change, but it's because if he changed, then the point of Shaun making the choice to have a more healthy balance in his life of Ed's involvement isn't as impactful.
Yeah.
If Ed becomes a more responsible human being, then it takes that choice away from Shaun a little bit, because a more responsible version of Ed wouldn't be living on Shaun's couch. Do you see what I mean? So I think you've got this weird situation when you're plotting out this movie. You just can't give Ed an arc. You physically can't, because if he changes in any way, shape, or form, it will detract from Shaun learning to have a better balance in his life of this situation. So I think that's why that happens. And of course, Liz is in a similar situation. Liz changing would hurt the ending as well, I think, because what I think is really interesting about the ending is Liz's concern when she breaks up with Shaun at the start of the movie is, I don't want to be coming to this same pub every night, basically until I die, wondering where my years went. And you sort of think, oh God, does that mean she wants to like travel the world? Does she want to do all this stuff? And then you realise it wasn't as deep as that. She didn't necessarily need to, lead a life of adventure. She didn't want to be dating Indiana Jones. She just wanted something more than that. Like anything more than that. And like the little quiet life she's built with Shaun after all that, which still seems quite quaint, was enough. It wasn't that she was being... I think if you'd have had an ending where they were, you might have made it seem like she was being unreasonable, basically, if she wasn't happy just, being in a relationship with him and living in that, and having that small quaint life. You'd start to think maybe she was being unreasonable at the beginning about her requests, like, you can't turn a Shaun into an Indiana Jones. But actually, she wanted Shaun. She loved Shaun. She just wanted Shaun to be a little more proactive about doing something more interesting with his life, even slightly more interesting, and I think that's a really interesting, and again, if she'd have had an arc and grown or changed anyway, that would have probably hurt Shaun's arc. In a weird way, this is one of those movies where almost all the characters are there to serve our lead and his growth. So in some of those cases, giving them arcs would probably have hurt him, because even like Dylan Moran's character, whose name I always forget, I want to say David, but I
think it is David.
I've not got IMDb open. I should open IMDb. Now I'm back at my laptop. But his character, if he changes at all, it's for the worse. Like he becomes a hazard to all of them towards the end. His jealousy of Shaun, which is one of the things that tests Shaun as the movie goes on, is again fundamental to pushing Shaun to where Shaun ends up. So again, all the characters are just serving Shaun. The stepdad, again, serves Shaun. The mum serves Shaun for the moment towards the end where David obviously makes the choice to try and put her down, which is the right thing to do. She's been bitten, but it's like he's showing no emotion over it. He's showing no empathy in the moment. He's not approaching it right. Almost all the characters have a role in getting Shaun into the place he's getting, and therefore he's the only one that really ends up with an arc. They all end up sort of serving that, which I think this movie has such a simple structure. That's fine. I think that's allowed. In a more complex movie, you'd probably want a bit more from the other characters, but I think this is firmly in the Shaun's perspective sort of camp, and it's about him learning this one lesson, and I think that that sort of is why they get away with it, where another film might not have.
How much should Dylan? I just wish Dylan Moran was in more movies. Do you know what I mean? He's so good. Well, everyone's good, but yeah.
Yeah, I particularly love Lucy Davis is great in this film. She's such a subtle performance, and it's such an understated performance, but she's so good in every scene.
Yeah, you get that she knows that David's in love with Liz the entire movie. Like it's not just that reveal that reveals that. Like it's so subtle and nuanced. But every performer is. It's a real ensemble movie. Everyone is firing on all cylinders. Everyone is and that's in the writing and the performances. I think there's that balance, and it's also let's talk about this. It's a fucking good zombie movie as well,
right? It really is.
Like,
I mean, yeah, go on.
It's playing homage and playing with the tropes, but in just really fun ways. But the bits that need to be threatening are threatening. There's some jump scares. There's just a real, but it's still doing fun stuff like them. It's I think the vinyl scene is a good example. So the scene where they're chucking vinyls at the zombies and they're slightly debating which vinyls to pick, and he doesn't want to get rid of some, and then some are shit and he can throw them, whatever. Like, that is not played for parody though. Like, it's funny because of the the context. It's something we've not seen in a zombie movie because it's a silly idea, but in the context of the movie, it's played, whilst it is funny, it's played seriously. It's played genuinely. They are trying to hit these zombies and stuff, and I think there's a world where, in the hands of lesser actors, writers, creators, directors, cinematographers, you could make that scene a parody of a zombie movie, but it is not a parody in that sense. It's playing homage.
That's sort of not the issue, but like one of the issues with those scary movies is they're so silly. You never feel the threat of the horror element of the film, right? Because it's just like, it's all so goofy and silly, and the world is so wacky because it is a full-on like parody, and because here he's choosing to homage the Romero movies, your Dawn of the Dead, United Living Deads, all those, while treating it all with respect and grounding it all, you can get jokes, but also threat. You feel the threat. You feel the tension ramping up as the movie goes on. You do feel like they're not particularly safe. You do understand the circumstances, and you're exactly right. It's a movie that gets to have its cake and eat it too, because it does get to do the comedy without diminishing the horror. And I'll be honest with you, listeners, I would love to be able to say, oh, this is how he made that work, that tonal balance. But I don't know. I don't know how that works. I've watched this movie dozens of times, and I have never been able to quite understand how he manages to balance it being a comedy and a zombie movie and it working without one detracting from the other. The horror never gets in the way of the comedy, and the comedy never gets in the way of the horror. And that's fucking magic. And again, I don't know how it works. I don't know if you have any ideas, Chris, because on any other film with any other filmmaker, I feel like one does detract from the other. The film can still be good with that being the case. Don't get me wrong, but it both work fully here, and neither seem to get in each other's way. And I'm scratching my head as to why.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you, Dan. I think I guess because maybe it's because they take, like I was saying with the vinyl scene, they take silly ideas seriously. Do you know what I mean? Like the fight in the pub where Queen's "Don't Stop Me Now" is playing, and they're fighting with pool cues, and they've got a gun and it's not got many bullets, and they're lighting the cocktails, but he can never get to it. All of that stuff. There's a lot of silly ideas in that, played completely seriously. So maybe that's it.
But how is he? So he's playing it seriously in the way he's filming it, in the way the character's reacting, a bit of everything. Like
all of it.
It's the movie doesn't. Yeah, you're right. The movie never diminishes the threat by like the joke is always. Yeah, I think the joke is always what they're doing. The threat of the zombie is real. See, that might be the difference actually, because in a movie like Scary Movie, the ghost face, and I'm sorry I'm going to Scary Movie, I just can't, horror comedies, my brain is just dying and I can't think of them. I'll Google some other ones so I can see if this logic works for those two. But like Scary Movie, often the threat, the ghost face, their version of ghost face, is in on the joke. He's also part of jokes, being involved in jokes. Whereas here, the zombies are legit all the time.
To be fair, I think that is the difference. There is also, but to be fair, this isn't necessarily, although I don't think those films are particularly great. This isn't necessarily a criticism of those, because they are parodies, and this is a zombie comedy. Like they're very different intent.
Yeah, agreed.
There.
But like I'm thinking about other horror comedies. So movies like Ready or Not, where the threat is real. The threat is real. The jokes aren't coming from the threat. The dead don't die.
Zombieland.
Yeah,
Zombieland's the
right.
same, isn't it? The threat's very real there.
Yeah. So it's about not diminishing the threat and making sure that your jokes don't do that.
And the threat is great. I mean, the scene where David gets his insides torn out.
Yes.
Like, there is some genuine horror, and obviously, and they do different homages. They do different types of horror. There's the horror of the physical horror of him getting his insides torn out. There's the emotional horror of the stepdad's death and then shooting the mum. Like those two scenes in particular have so much weight and heart to them. And Simon Pegg's performance is very strong in those moments. I think there's just so many elements. There's so much. That's another thing to talk about. There's so much heart in this movie. The moment of, Liz discovering the bite, but her giving her the necklace from Shaun's real dad, and saying how nice it was to meet her. One of my favourites is Liz saying, and Liz being the first to say, Liz saying "love you" to Ed as they go up in the lift, and he's there just about to be attacked by a load of zombies, basically.
Yeah,
he's already been attacked, but
my favorite one is when he finally says it's his dad. He says regarding his stepdad played by Bill Nighy, he says he's not my dad, and she's like, oh Shaun, he's like, no mum, you don't understand, he's not my dad, he was, but now he's something different. And that's the first time he's referred to him as his dad in the whole movie. And he's done it in that moment after he's turned, and it's like the tragedy of that relationship and what it could have been. If either of these two characters had spoken to each other and worked this out, they could have had years of being on good terms and enjoying each other's company, but they weren't able to, admit how they felt. Like, Bill Nighy's character's dying moment, he uses that to tell Shaun that he does still love him, even though he's not his own kid. And even though Shaun's been a real prick to him, and he just wanted him to be. He wanted the same thing for Shaun that Liz wanted for Shaun, which is for Shaun to try, make some effort in his life.
The dialogue there, I've got it up.
Good.
I don't know if this transcript is complete, but you were 12 when I met you. You'd already grown up so much. I just wanted you to be strong and not give up because you lost your dad. And I've always loved you, Shaun, and I always thought you had it in you to do well. You just needed motivation, somebody to look up to, and I thought it could be me. Would you just take care of your mum? There's a good boy. Now, there is so much weight in that short dialogue, and you understand it feels so real, it feels so earnest, and you as an audience member can picture what life was like for those two growing up, and how the dad, I can't remember Bill Nighy's character's name. I haven't got it in front of me. It is, I don't know if you have.
I'm pulling it.
Philip. How Philip was genuinely trying and just getting it wrong, and how Shaun reacted to him getting it wrong and trying, and how actually that has probably influenced. Like, him trying to force motivation on Shaun probably had a hand in Shaun's complacency, because he got fed up of trying to be pushed to be more motivated, so just kind of didn't, even though he could. Like, there's so much, like, they managed to tell you so much about those two characters, how we got here, and all of that in, like, 4 lines of dialogue. It's incredible writing. And
then, to top that off with the "he's not my dad, he was" line, which really just sends home. It honestly knocks out the park. It's so good. And again, you're right. What's remarkable about this movie really is how much heart it squeezes in. Like, there is absolutely, like, not a moment that isn't telling us something interesting about one of these characters. Even if they don't all have arcs, they all are going through something interesting and have an interesting situation, usually relating to Shaun, but like, like that as you said, that Bill Nye character in that moment particularly, that reveals what their relationship really was. Not what we've seen superficially up until that point in the movie, which is, stepdad, stepson not particularly getting on. But to give it that extra context in his dying moments is both brilliant and tragic all at once, and it does really inform everything you've seen prior, and really gives weight to what happens next.
Did you feel so in terms of like attempting to find critiques? One, obviously, there's some dialogue and language, particularly from the Ed character, that can make you wince a little bit.
Yeah, I had a question with you about that, Chris, because we talked about this very recently with, what film was it? Clerks. So, Ed is in the wrong. And I think the movie puts Ed in that position of being in the wrong. Do you think it does?
I think not overly, because whilst you get, I suppose you get Shaun and the friends reacting and sighing when he says stuff, but I think also the movie is there's an intent there, and I think it's clear that Ed means no offense by anything he says. Mm-hmm. He's just talking and just a bit of an idiot. And also it's really difficult because, I watched this film in 2000 and, when we were 15, 16. That kind of language, that kind of, all right, gay, Community came out years after that, and let's not forget that was a main joke in Community. There is still, I don't think you'd get that now. But, the whole gay, that's a thing from Community, which is years after this. It really is a thing of its time. And I think whilst many people are making a conscious effort to not do things like that anymore, it's still happening by a long way. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
see, I feel a little bit weird about that, a little bit differently about this one, because I just kind of feel like the whole point of the Ed character is he's who you shouldn't be. Like, Ed is not a person to aspire to be. Putting that in his mouth and no one else's feels like the movie showing us that he's stuck in the past. He's stuck in his youth. He's stuck in childlike behavior. Because he's in a state of arrested development.
And I think there's a lot of motifs of he was always a zombie, and then at the end he's a literal zombie, but fundamentally he's been a zombie all along.
Right.
But I don't know. Do you think that? I don't know. I'd need to think more on whether I think the movie is saying that's. I suppose it's a difference, isn't it? Yes, I think the movie is saying, especially Shaun's character, shouldn't inspire to be like Ed, and Ed is bringing him down.
Right.
But
everyone says Ed's an asshole.
Yeah, but for Ed, do you know what I mean? Ed is just Ed and happy with that.
Right. But I really feel strongly that like that's the point. Like, don't be Ed. Ed's happy and thinks this is fine. And it's not.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I see it. But I mean, I take it that it is, because I think it's the same in Community. It's Chang that does that, right?
Yeah.
This is not a character framed as being correct. I think sometimes these are observations about that kind of language. In Clerks, I don't think that was necessarily as clear. But I feel like in these examples, that point of don't be these people is very much on display. I don't know. I could be wrong, but the whole point of this movie seems to be that like he's not someone to aspire to. I did Google, by the way, other horror comedies just to see if there's any others that crop up that have a similar approach, and there's a few that I'd kind of forgotten about. Little Monsters, the Lupita Nyong'o one with Josh Gad, which is a zombie horror comedy. Again, the threat kept very real the whole time. The comedy coming from the characters. Happy Death Day, again, threat very real. Comedy coming from the characters. Werewolves Within. Werewolf horror comedy, same, really good. A movie that we're probably going to cover at some point, The Voices, Fantastic sort of horror comedy. Although the problem with the voices is it's 10 years old at this point. It's not quite in our window, but we've made exceptions before, so maybe we would. I feel like the voices is one we'll eventually cover on here, though. Tucker and Dale versus Evil, another good one. Horror comedy. That one, because the threat is the characters, that one's a bit different, because it's not like there's not an external threat like a zombie or a werewolf or anything like that.
Yeah, but that threat is very real.
Yeah, the threat continues to be real throughout the movie. Well, actually, the problem is at the beginning of the movie, the threat isn't real. That's the problem. That's how the movie starts, but then it gets into real stuff.
Yes, but to the characters, it's real.
Right, exactly.
So from their perspective, the threat is as real as the zombies here.
Yeah. So there's some good ones here. Freaky's also really good, but Freaky's a bit of a strange one. So yeah, I'd googled some while we were talking, so I was curious to list some of them. I recommend everyone goes checks out Little Monsters though. That one's a really good one. I've not seen that since it came out.
The only other bit of the movie that isn't a criticism, but it did make me go, I wanted to explore the choice to not show Shaun diverting the zombies. Not show how he got away from them. Now, obviously, part of the point is later on we discover he didn't really. He didn't particularly get away from them or divert them anywhere. They followed him. But that is obviously quite a heroic moment, him going off and running away. I love the reveal when he throws the peanuts and Shaun catches them. I think that's a great, great moment. I love Liz's reaction to it. I think it's Kate Ashford, isn't it? Is the actress's name. Kate Ashfield, and she's brilliant throughout. They all are. But in that moment, her sort of slowly, seeing and realizing that he's doing something. But it's an interesting choice to not on screen really show the heroism in the moment from Shaun. What do you think of that choice?
I love it because two things. One, there's got to be a budget element to that. You don't want to necessarily. How do you film and show that epic escape? But two, it gives us, and I think this is the real reason. The amount of discussion they get to have about Shaun when Shaun's not there. We get to learn how everyone feels about Shaun in that moment because he's not present. So while he's gone, David sort of tries to take the reins, and is like, no, he's incompetent. It's ridiculous. He's going to get us all killed. We were perfectly safe where we were, which is probably true. But the point is there. What we learn is that Liz now feels differently about Shaun as a result of the events of the movie, because we get her defending him. And I think without that moment, the rest of the movie doesn't play anywhere nearly as well. So not only do we get the epic Shaun returning part, which I still love, and seeing everyone's reaction to Shaun, because in a weird way, Dylan Moran's character David was doing a worse job prior, because even Diane says to him, we were just staying in that apartment. That wasn't a plan. He's like, we were safer there. And she's like, yeah, but were we? And it's like, well, who knows? But the point is, Shaun did something, whereas David would have chose to stay in their flat. So the stuff he was criticizing Shaun for earlier, he became himself. And we learn all that in that exchange. And then we get that great hero moment of Shaun catching the peanuts, which is just, and then that's immediately, of course, undercut by the fact that he clearly doesn't have a plan, and they're all just sort of sat there eating scraps. Although, a lifestyle of eating nothing but mini cheddars and drinking warm pints, not the end of the world.
No. Do you think so? Again, this isn't. I'm trying to be fair. I'm trying to, you know what I mean. I'm trying to find critiques. Although, like I say, I think this is a perfect movie. Do you think Liz is an interesting one? Because so Liz goes, sorry, not Liz. Diane. Diane is an interesting one, yeah, because Diane admits that she knows that her boyfriend has always loved Liz, and that David, when he couldn't go out with Liz,
are they supposed to be a couple? I've been wondering about that. Are they definitely supposed to be a couple, or are they just supposed to be a friend group? I was wondering about that.
I think they're a couple.
Does the movie ever explicitly say that?
Hold on. This is my boyfriend, Declan. Oh no, that's so. I'm just seeing if.
Yeah, I've been wondering about this because I was mixed the whole movie about whether they were in a relationship or whether they were just really close friends and she just knows him that well. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I'm just looking it up. I'm searching keywords in the script and can't find anything explicit.
Yeah. I don't think they ever say it, which makes me think maybe they're not.
So do you think, basically the choice of her to go nuts when he gets attacked and try and defend him in a way that is categorically going to get her killed. Yeah. Do you think they do enough to justify and explain that choice?
That's a big question because where the line for justification is interesting. Because so do I go? I understand why that character has done that. Yes. Do I 100% believe that a person in that position would make that choice though?
Yeah.
I understand the reasons, but do I buy it? Basically, no. I think you're right. I think there's probably not enough. Especially because we've just had her. Actually, I don't know because think about in the Mexican standoff moment. So this is the moment where Shaun's mum has been bitten. She's going to change. David grabs the gun, points it at Shaun's mum. He grabs a bottle, smashes it, holds it to David's throat, and says, "It's my mum. Don't hurt my mum." And then Nick Frost also smashes the bottle and holds it to David's throat, and then. Lucy's like, well, wait a minute. So he gives her the bottle so she can hold that to Shaun's. Not Lucy, sorry. Lucy Davis, obviously the character. Diane. She gets a bottle and holds it to Shaun's throat. So it's like the two best friends are framed defending their person that they're the friend with. So even then in that moment, we see that Diane is willing to murder for David.
Yeah, so do you think which makes it, if they are a couple, I kind of buy that more, because her saying, I know you've always loved Liz, is not resentment. She's almost a tragic character, because she's almost just accepted it. She's almost just accepted that that's the case, that's the situation, and that's, that's okay, and she still loves him.
Yeah, I don't know. I for some reason I really I feel strongly that they're not a couple, but I could be wrong. I just think it's tragic in that she's always known. Maybe she likes him, but he's never responded. I think the tragedy is that she does love him, but he's never had any interest in her. So they've always been friends. And then
exactly. That's what I'm saying. So I'm okay. Maybe that works.
I think I think if they're in a couple, that kind of not hurts it, but it's like it's less clear, because then it's like, well, he must have shown some level of affection for her. I do think she loves him, but I don't think they're together. And she knows the reason they're not together is because he's still pining after Liz, and that's the reason she's never gone.
You're right.
It.
So the dialogue is, I know you only hung out with me to get close to Liz, and when she knocked you back, I was there to pick up the pieces. I've come to terms with that, Daphs. Why can't you? So that's the line. So it could be either, yeah. And I think both interpretations you can make work. Either they're friends and she's got unrequited feelings for him, or they are a couple, but she knows that he actually loves someone else. And the thing is, both of those interpretations make sense of her decision to then go into the horde of zombies in a definitely ill-fated attempt to save him.
Yeah, I would agree. It works. I think so little of this movie doesn't work. And I tell you what else. I don't know if we've already talked too much about it, but the dialogue is laser focused in this movie. It's so good. The speed at which jokes hit you, while also all this great character and work and all this interesting stuff is happening, while it's also being a really effective movie with all the zombie tropes, it's kind of amazing. It's again, this is a magic trick, this movie, in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also really like the visual choices at the beginning in the opening sequence, when they have, like, it's people living their lives, but they're almost like zombies, like the guy that's job is to, like, push the trolleys, like, he's just sort of doing it without really paying attention to what he's doing, like, that idea of, we're all zombies in our own way, either doing our jobs or we're living our daily routines, it's a fun little parallel the movie makes early on.
Absolutely, and it's saying something. It's almost saying something about a wider. Do you know what I mean? A wider theme of life and complacency in general.
Right, exactly. Yeah, 100%. And I think that's that's evident in Shaun's arc, because that is what Shaun's arc's about. But then it's amazing how much the two themes marry, like the idea of zombies and the idea of a person not doing anything with their lives. Like, it's amazing how much those two things weirdly come together thematically. And also, like, and again, just from a filmmaking perspective, like, little choices, like, to put it in the script, potentially, some would argue, maybe, like, some would argue they'd be wrong, but somebody could easily say to me, oh, the scene at the beginning where he goes to the shops the first time, what's the point of that? We just see him go to the shop and come back, or go to work, I should say. And I'm like, well, it's so that you see his morning routine and how it normally looks. So for the contrast in what is one of the most iconic scenes in the movie, which is I'm going shops, do you want out cornetto, and he goes to the shops oblivious to the zombie apocalypse. And the filmmaking of that is that it is the exact same camera angles that were used on his previous morning's journey. We do that exact journey again, but this time we don't, people on the street living their lives. Someone runs past him. The car that was being washed the day before is smashed now, but he's just oblivious to it all. Again, his own version of a zombie. And without the first scene, that second scene doesn't work, and it's one of the best scenes in the movie. So yeah, I really love the way that's all done. I think it's really clever.
Yeah, and there's loads of stuff like that in general. The use of colour, the use of red throughout the movie as like representative of blood. And then kind of the wider themes, and obviously then we've got blue running through Hot Fuzz, green in The World's End, and they relate to the colours of the cornetto. The use of music is absolutely phenomenal.
Yes.
So there's all those things as well. The filmmaking in general is very, it's like you say, it's not as polished from a filmmaking perspective in a way as The World's End or something like Baby Driver. But, to be fair to Edgar Wright, I would argue it is as polished for the budget he was playing with. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
You give Edgar Wright Baby Driver budget, he produces Baby Driver. Give him Shaun of the Dead budget, he produces Shaun of the Dead. The filmmaking talent is exactly the same, I would argue. He's just got a bigger canvas and more money in future films.
Yeah, I think there's a truth to that as well. I mean, I do feel him learning as he goes across these three movies, but I do think you're right in that. I think he gets more. I think he plays around with it more. Like he's got a really deliberate style, and you see him getting confident executing it. Maybe is what it is across the movies rather than learning, because he's such a proficient filmmaker here. It's kind of insane the idea that he gets any better. Like it's like this is so well done. But yeah, I think maybe it's just about maybe he's learning the best way to implement his style of filmmaking as he goes, and gets bolder with it maybe. Because World's End, like when you get to the action sequences in World's End, particularly the fight in the pub bathroom, which a lot of people point to as like being one of the most iconic scenes in that movie, it's so incredibly well shot, and it's definitely tighter and way better shot and edited than the pool cue fight here. I think the pool cue fight here is good, and it has some great shots, but you can see him perfecting it. And also then you look at Baby Driver and the choice to have the gunshots line up to the beat of the music, but he does that in this movie where when they're playing Queen and they're having the pool cue fight with the zombie, they're hitting it in time with the movie. I think the Baby Driver one is better executed. I think it's tighter. I think it's clearer what's happening. I do think there is growth between them, as well as that he gets a bigger budget. But I mean, again, we're talking about someone who started at such a high level. This movie is so good. This isn't a criticism of this movie. Just more. I'm astonished to see Edgar Wright just keeps getting better. It's like, how? And I know that some people had some concerns about the script and some of the choices in Last Night in Soho. I personally loved Last Night in Soho and didn't have any of those issues, but I think that was kind of some of the stuff people bring up. I sometimes think that was kind of the point of the movie, was that you weren't supposed to agree with that, but that, it's fine. But whatever. The filmmaking on display has just always been top notch, though, regardless of any thoughts on some of the scripts. Just incredible, absolutely incredible. We've not even mentioned Scott Pilgrim, which is another absolute sort of masterpiece of his filmmaking technique. And that's another one where he gets to stretch his comedy chops a bit more. Because Last Night in Soho a bit more serious. Say with Baby Driver. I really relate hard to one element of this movie, Chris. And I was wondering if that hit you at all. I work personally with a lot of in my job. I work with a lot of 20-year-olds, quite young people, and it makes me feel old every single day. And the sequence at the beginning of this movie where he's where the guy's he's like, I'm not that old. I'm 29 or whatever, and the kid's like, I'm 17, and Shaun just looks defeated and destroyed forever by it. And some of the way that they talk to and about him, I feel that. I feel that very deeply.
I don't know. I never struggle with that as much as some do. I have the odd moment, there was a moment going to I get that more. Weirdly, I get that more at gigs, where I feel like, oh God, are people looking at me being like, all right, mate, you shouldn't be here, especially if it's a band with a younger audience or something. But I get what you're saying, and I think that is very. There's a lot of very relatable stuff in here, I think, for sure.
Yeah, it was that meme of, I see myself in this picture and I don't like it.
Yeah. We are definitely at a bizarre age where, I think we don't feel that disconnected from, and I think it's also our situation. Neither of us have kids and stuff, which I think, speaking to, at least in the people I've spoken to's experience, there's something about having a child and that responsibility that then makes you inherently feel older. At least that's what people have said to me.
It's really interesting.
Sorry, hold on one second.
Internet culture is.
Thank you very much. Jess has just brought me in some breakfast. Very nice.
Oh, lovely.
Thank you very much.
I think.
I
was just gonna say, I think as well, in a weird internet age, there is an element as well where we do have an advantage. I am, to a degree, aware of some stuff. Although I keep saying this to the guys at work, when I hear about something, it's over. As a 35-year-old, once I learned the word Riz was done. You can't say Riz anymore.
Riz is.
So Riz is a term that was being used for a brief window early this year, late last year, I think. Early this year, I think. It was short for charisma. So you'd say someone has Riz. Oh, they got Riz. Oh man, they picked up that girl. They don't even have any Riz. That was the phrase. And as soon as I knew what that phrase was, I was like, that phrase is done. You can't use it anymore. Old person has it now. You're done. Stop. and that is kind of what happened. It was interesting. This happens a lot. But yeah, the benefit of working with younger people, I guess, is I do get to sometimes. I do get to sort of live through that in that I don't feel as disconnected as I could if I wasn't speaking with these people every day.
But do you? Because surely if you like you say, it seems to me that you saying it is the thing that ends it for them, from what you've said. So if you say it to them, you're ending it for them. And I imagine if you were out with friends your age, if we were hanging out and you were like, oh yeah, that person's got no Riz, I'd just be like, okay, okay, Dad.
Yeah, but the thing is, I don't use the word. It's just once I learn what the word is, I'm like, oh, if it's reached my sphere, I'm not walking around saying people have Riz. What I'm saying is, once the word reaches me, it's probably done because of how fast culture moves. Like, it's just really interesting.
But on a side note, do you think I've got Riz?
Oh, you got plenty of Riz, mate. You got all the Riz.
Oh, cheers, mate. Full of Riz.
Full of Riz. Or as we'd say back in my day, full of beans.
What other notes you got?
I love all the movies foreshadowing. The movie is so good at foreshadowing. When Ed says about their roommate, Peter Serafinowicz' character, who I can't remember the name of the character. Where's Peter Serafinowicz in my... Oh, Pete. Oh, Peter plays Pete. Shocking. Ed says next time I see him, he's dead. Which is just an amazing line, because the next time he sees him, he's literally dead. There's a lot of, in the bar the night before, it's not like it's the end of the world. It's just amazing. The movie's just full of that. Like it's almost like every other line is some sort of foreshadowing for something that's going to happen later on. It's great. There's tons of it.
When they're flicking through the news as well, and it's different channels, but it's forming one sentence explaining the plot.
Brilliant. Great choice. Fun as anything. What a really fun way to approach that. It's like just that idea of like, well, we could just have him see the news, but that's boring. What's the more interesting way to do that? It's a great idea. I also like the weird sort of directness of the dialogue. Like when Ed says, "There's a woman in the garden." Like it's just such a he's not. It's just a simple observation of a fact, and it's weirdly effective. They talk like that a lot in this movie, where they just literally say the thing that's happening in the shortest sentence they can, just very deliberate, very focused, and I really enjoy that. So I think that's one of the things the film does really well. We haven't talked about this yet, but the other survivor group.
Oh yeah!
What a genius
how has that
moment.
not come up?
Yeah, so basically one of my favourite scenes from the whole movie, and it's actually immediately followed up by one of the other most iconic moments in the movie as well. But one of my favourite scenes in the movie is their little group of survivors are coming down like a back alley, like a little sort of almost like a ginnel between two rows of houses, gardens, and they get to a corner, and there's Shaun meets his ex. She's with her boyfriend, the way he's with his girlfriend, her mum, the way he's with his mum, their flatmates, and then her best mate. So the two groups are like identical. They've each got their own version of Ed. They've each got their own version of the main character's mum. They've each got their own version of their partner and their flatmates. But they're all played by like mad sort of like famous people cameos. So like
well, it's that meme, isn't it, of people saying I'd really love to see that movie as well.
Right, yeah, 100% what their journey was. So obviously Jessica Haynes plays Yvonne, but she's not just in this scene. She shows up earlier in the movie and later in the movie too. But her sort of group, it's Martin Freeman, Tamsin Gregg, I think Reece Shearsmith, which is crazy, is playing the male roommate. Then it's Tamsin Gregg playing the female roommate. Then Julia Deakin plays Yvonne's mum, and then Matt Lucas plays Tom, who is Ed. Mad. That is a mad list of famous people.
What's funny about that is, and those people that was a hot list in 2004, but it's an even hotter list now.
Right.
Like all of them have gone on to become, really, really famous and delivering, some of the best work on film and TV in Britain over the last 10 years, 15 years. So, yeah, that is crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? And every time I see it, I'm just like, sort of scratch my head at like how they. I mean, to some of them, it's obvious how it happened. Obviously, Martin Freeman has the clear link to Lucy Davis, who plays Diane. Tamsin Gregg has the clear link to Dylan Moran, who plays David. So that some of this you sort of go like, well, they just put in a phone call, right? Called in a mate. That makes sense. But Matt Lucas, I'm not sure, what his link is. Reece Shearsmith, I'm not sure what his link is. This is it's madness. A really fun moment. And just this idea that there's like another group that have the exact same sort of like makeup in terms of the people. It's just such a funny idea, and it's executed so perfectly.
So, do you think, because, and again, to critique deliberately here, do you think one area that the film really benefits in people's understanding and knowledge and awareness and the pop cultureness of zombies and zombie movies means they get away with an ending that you could argue does come out of nowhere? And do you think they should have built up throughout the movie, there's a character going, well, the army will come in, because that's what has to happen. Of course they will. Well, what if they don't? Da-da-da. Do you think that resolution... Do you think you could argue it comes out of nowhere? I'm not necessarily saying it does. Again, no, I'm critiquing for the purpose of discussion.
You could argue that. So for those who don't remember how this movie ends, it's Shaun and Liz, the last two essentially surviving, and they've got weapons and they're about to face a big horde, and the army basically turn up and shoot them all. I think that's fine because it's a comedy, so they get the benefit of the comedic punch of the two heroes about to face down a horde. Someone else more capable does it for them, because it's kind of both a joke and a resolution to the problem. So I think that's fine, because I think if you'd set it up too much, you're sort of cutting into the joke. I guess the subtlest way you could have done it was when they bump into Yvonne and Shaun says what their plan is, going to the Winchester, and she's like, the pub. And he's like, yeah, we're going to give that a go. And she's like, oh, we'd heard a rumour there was a military encampment outside of London. We're heading to that. And Shaun like, all right, well, good luck then.
But because they do the first bit of that, I do think they get away with it because of that. They set up, she knows where they're going to be. And when she rescues them, she says something like, I wanted to see you for surviving. Like, she basically indicates that she directed them there.
Yes.
Because she thought there'd be survivors there.
Yeah. Which is great. But it could have also been used to set up where it was she was going. If you wanted to implant the idea of the military stepping in earlier, that would have been your moment to do it. Sure. So yeah, but I would say... I would say they get away with it. I think it's fine because it is kind of played as a joke and it's allowed to come out of nowhere. But yeah, speaking of that, it's worth noting, obviously, one of the other most iconic moments from the movie. And I'll be honest, it's not one of my favourite jokes, so I always find it strange. This is such an iconic point, but it's what's that, David? Sorry about that, David. You never taken a shortcut before, and he goes to hop over the fence, and the fence falls over, so he just sort of falls down. That happens almost immediately after the two groups meet. So I just think it's really interesting that the two very iconic moments of this movie happen back to back.
I think it's a great piece of physical comedy. I really do. It's so simple.
1 second. Yeah, yes, Nadia, go for it. She texts me to ask if she can come in to get her jacket and or a cap. She's welcome to take a cap. I don't know about a jacket.
Why can't she take her jacket?
What's that, sorry?
Why don't you know about her jacket? Why wouldn't she be able to take that?
Well, I don't know where it is. She thought it might be in here.
Oh, right.
She's asking if she can come in to look for it in here, but I don't know where it is.
Right.
She says sorry, Chris, but she can't find it. Sorry, Nadia.
Hey, it's not me you should be apologising to, Nadia. It's the listeners.
She's gone. She's borrowed a cap as well. She's doing an activity today. She doesn't know what. It's a surprise activity for her birthday from someone. Her birthday wasn't today, I should clarify. I'm not doing a podcast on her birthday, but someone and a friend and her are doing an activity sort of a week later. Well, no, more than a week later. God, nearly a month later. Jeez. Get on it, friend. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Jesus. God, what a poor friend, even though I didn't even text her.
3.5 weeks, just saying. Anyway.
I don't think there's a world in which Nadia would expect... To be honest with you, mate, if I think I'd have texted her happy birthday, it would have creeped her out.
That's possible. Yeah, I would argue there's a possibility of that. Man, my charger still has full beans, man. That is crazy how much that is charging the microphone that it's still running. It's got 4 out of 5 blobs. No, it's got 4 out of 4. It's full. That's crazy. Sorry, I've just realized I'm still running the microphone off that, obviously, because we haven't stopped recording. So the microphone is still powered by my power pack. Right. Any other notes? So what were we talking about? Sorry, we got distracted, didn't we? What were we?
I think we'd wrapped it up. It was the ending and that working and stuff, I think.
Yes. Let's see. Have I got any other notes before we move on? I must have some. Very quickly, I love Ed getting the phone call while they're pretending to be zombies and him just taking it. It's just my favourite thing. I love it. I love it so much.
Mm.
It's not particularly like a smart moment or like, you know, one of the movie's most clever jokes or anything like that, but it's just it's really well played.
It does help sort of vilify Ed and just help that notion of you shouldn't want to be Ed.
Right, yes. Agreed. Sorry. Agreed. It's a great scene. Also, who died and made you king of the zombies? Just before that, when Ed's getting annoyed because Shaun's criticising his zombie performance, then Shaun does one and and Ed's like, yeah, it's pretty good. I love that. It's fun. The dart to the head is one of the most awful visuals in cinema. I am unable to look at it. It's that upsetting. I have to close my eyes. I genuinely close my eyes. I don't like it. Upsets me.
Fair enough.
So there's a point when, I should say for listeners who might not have seen the film recently, there's a point when Shaun's scuffling with some zombies in the pub, and Diane decides that how she can help. She grabs the darts from the darts board and starts trying to throw them at the zombies. She misses the zombie, catches Shaun straight in the head, and he's got a dart hanging out of his head for the next 2 minutes of footage, which I, generally speaking, close my eyes through. It's genuinely upsetting, to my very core. That churns my stomach every time. Don't like it.
That's fair. That's all reasonable.
I think the contrast between Shaun and Dylan Moran's character David is really stark. It obviously culminates in the callous way David points the gun at his mum, and it doesn't matter that David's right. I think it's really interesting, though, that David maybe wouldn't have made some of the choices Shaun had made that day in terms of so Shaun earlier in the movie, despite knowing Philip's bitten, puts Philip in the car. And while that is a stupid choice, it shows his empathy. It shows his kindness. It shows that he's got something more in him and about him. He's not just He's not just in it to look after himself. He is a kind-hearted person. And even though it is deeply stupid to get in the car, an enclosed space, with a man that's about to turn into a zombie, he still does it anyway because he loves his mum and he cares. And when we get to the ending and David is callously pointing a gun at her, it really does land the differences between them and really does settle who you think might be the better man. And it's not about action, it's not about having the right plan, it's who's the better human being of these two. And it's so clear when you get to that moment, and it's just great to draw a contrast between the two. My only slight criticism of that scene is at that point one of the windows has been smashed in, and even though there's a stray line of Shaun block that up, will you? I'm sure you see it in the background with the zombie hanging out of it, and there's an element while that entire scene is playing out of, why aren't the zombies coming in? I'd have to rewatch it to check that's a real that's practically a problem, but it does. That's certainly how it played on my viewing yesterday, and I remember thinking the zombies should be in the building by now. This whole shooting Shaun's mum scene goes on for a long time.
Yeah, there's a fair bit of that throughout, isn't there? But I think that's just a little poetic license, isn't it?
Yeah, and I also, for me, a big trope of a zombie movie is being trapped in a place and going a bit stir crazy, and the group turning in on each other. Who's the real threat here, sort of thing. So that's it's nice that they managed to squeeze that into this film. That's doing an awful lot else as well. And I think the last note I have here is I do always laugh at Ed coming back over the bar. I don't know why it makes me laugh every time, but this idea that he's just, in a normal zombie movie, Ed's gone. He was surrounded by zombies, he was being bitten, blood going everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Yeah.
he just leaps over the bar and joins the last two, just holding the cut like, bloody hell. Like, it's just so funny. It's so ridiculous. So yeah, that's all the notes I had. I big recommend. Shaun of the Dead's obviously amazing. I don't know if you...
it's incredible.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add in terms of overall thoughts. So I guess we should we start to do the thing?
Let's triv it up!
I'm gonna give you some trivia, and I will say, very relieved that I never had to say that line out in public. I'm glad I was home and home to do the rest of the podcast and not out on the street. I did get a few looks. I didn't mention this as we were going, but I did get a few funny looks by people that passed while we were doing that.
Really? Surely London's just full of vloggers and bloggers and
Yeah, I don't know.
people.
Jesus. I regret ever teaching you the word.
That's how. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair.
Now it's definitely over.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, just like teenagers. This is the bank holiday. This is August bank holiday. We're recording this, and just a field full of teenagers at Reading Festival and Leeds Festival just sighed.
But they didn't really know why.
They felt it. No. They yeah.
It's like a disturbance in the force.
Yeah.
That
I'd feel old there. I'd feel old if I was at Reading and Leeds. Like, it's such a past your GCSEs festival.
Yeah, that is a young person's festival for sure. For sure. Okay, so trivia time, Chris. I wouldn't go back to Reading and or Leeds now as an adult for sure. I was thinking about that. And I was just like, no, that really is a thing. Okay. So, because of the...
Lineup's good, though. I would have gone this year if I could have done, I think. But I would have insisted, I think, on staying in a premiere in.
Yeah, just good doing the gigs bit, not the camping out bit. Leeds, Reading. Let's have a look. Who was on the lineup this year? I didn't look at it. Let's see. Reading and Leeds. Sam Ryder? Or was that last year?
Sam Fender.
Oh, it was tiny. I've made it bigger now. I can now read it. So Sam Fender, Killers. This poster is awful. What the fuck is this poster? It's not laid out in a way that makes it clear.
If you were about to say Lewis Capaldi, it's an old poster as well.
Oh yeah, Lewis Capaldi, Billie Eilish, Imagine Dragons. Yeah. Imagine Dragons, more like for me Imagine Better Musicians.
The thing for me is there's probably only 7 or 8 bands I would see, but they're some of literally my favourite bands at the moment.
All right, well, very quickly, who's on this? So, a Wet Leg on that list?
Wet Leg are on that list, but they're not necessarily one of mine. Are you? Oh, who's on? You're trying to guess what my list is?
Yeah. I'd absolutely be straight to Wet Leg. I love Wet Leg.
Oh no, I do like Wet Leg, and I would see Wet Leg. But it's Vistas, The Snuts, Seagulls, Frank Turner. Obviously, I really like the 1975 For My Sins. I'd see Sam Fender. I wouldn't say he's one of my favourite acts, but I'd see him. I'd see Wet Leg. I'd maybe see Billie. I probably wouldn't see Billie Eilish if I'm honest. No, would I see Billie Eilish? Because I think Billie Eilish would be one of those things where I'm not necessarily a huge Billie Eilish fan, but that's going to be a fucking moment in the crowd.
Yeah,
like that's going to be a big one.
Especially if she do you think she should do the track from Barbie?
Oh, I would have thought so, and that would be insane, wouldn't it?
This poster is fucking horrible. Why have they ruined the Reading Leeds poster?
No, I know. But yeah, specifically Frank Turner, Vistas, huge fan of them.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, I'd be very excited by them.
No one. I'm interested, but I don't think anyone else cares. So let's do the trivia for Shaun of the Dead, Chris. My fault, I asked, but yeah. Because of the timing, so this is a really unfortunate thing. The time frame they were going to release this movie was the time frame that our good buddy Zack Snyder, everyone's favourite filmmaker, was releasing his remake of Dawn of the Dead, which remains one of his best films, mostly because he didn't write it. It was written by James Gunn, with help with George Romero is credited. I don't know if that's just because he wrote the original and it's based on that, or if it's because he worked on the script. But yeah, it's Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, which is a brilliant movie. It was coming out at the same time, and because this is called Shaun of the Dead, that meant distributors were forced to hold this movie back until after Dawn of the Dead was released in the UK. to avoid confusing the marketplace. Blah blah blah. That is unfortunate, but there you go. They got to put it out in the
That
end.
might have benefited. That might have benefited this movie, though. Surely.
Yeah, I mean, it came out
it
very
would've
closely after a remake of Dawn of the Dead. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Yeah, it's such a good movie, Dawn of the Dead. It's really good. I might rewatch that at some point. Anyway, just when Shaun is exiting the corner shop, there's a radio playing songs from Indian movies. The song stops and a newscaster begins speaking in Hindi. The content of this news, when translated into English, is people are waking up from their graves. So the hint is there well before it happens in the movie. When Shaun is in the shop for the first time, a worker on the street is listening to a radio. You hear them mention a space probe unexpectedly re-entering Earth's atmosphere and broke up over England. This is likely a reference to Night of the Living Dead, in which radiation from a satellite returning from Venus was given as a possible cause for the zombie apocalypse.
Oh,
so that's fun. When Shaun is on the phone to his mum, Barbara, Ed says, "We're coming to get you, Barbara." This is a direct reference to the classic horror movie line said in the original Night of the Living Dead from 1968, where someone yells, "We're coming to get you, Barbara. There's one now."
what I really liked about that line as well is it told you. I didn't get the reference, but I liked the line because it said a lot about their friendship and says who they are. Do you know what I mean? Like my oldest. I had we won't get into my dark theory about friendships because it's really depressing. I feel like I've got to say it now quickly, haven't I?
What?
I got a theory that like one way you could obviously there's friends and then there's like friends. There's like old friends or really close friends, and I think one indicator of that is for example. If anything, it's a dark way, and it's a dark way of looking at it. You can view it both ways. But if anything happened to you, for example, my mum and dad would most likely attend your funeral, which is an indication of how close we are as friends.
Right.
Do you see what I mean? Like that relationship, if someone has a relationship with the parent as well, either it means they've been friends since they were at school, or they are so close as adults that there have been a lot of interaction between the parent and the child and the person in question. So him saying, "We're coming to get you, Barbara," says an awful lot about the framing of their friendship because he knows his mum. See what I mean?
Yes, agreed.
I mean, the
100%
funeral
agreed.
thing makes it. The funeral thing is a weird analogy, but it's something I thought the other day. I thought about yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to let it hang because I don't really. It's such an interesting way. It is an interesting way to dissect it, but I also don't have any extra thoughts on that because I've never thought about it from that perspective before.
No, it's really dark. But when I say it to people, they go, "Oh yeah," like, and they think about like if something happened to their mate's parents, would they go? And it's kind of like the ones you would go for are probably your closest friends. So yeah,
Yes,
interesting.
Yeah. So that line was from Night of the Living Dead, the 1968 version. So when they gave George A. Romero a private viewing of this movie near his home in Florida, during that scene when Ed yells into the phone, "We're coming to get you, Barbara," Romero was apparently oblivious to the fact that's a line from his movie, and only found out later after a phone conversation with Edgar Wright that it was direct line. But he was so impressed with the film, he then brought Simon and Edgar in to cameo as zombies in Land of the Dead, which was his 2005 zombie film, which I saw in the cinemas and enjoyed.
Nice.
Yeah. So there you go. So George A. Romero not even realising that was a reference to him, which I enjoy. So many of the extras from this movie were just fans of Spaced, which is obviously directed by Edgar Wright, starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost and Jessica Hines as well. And they basically used the Spaced Out fan website to recruit them to help with the zombie stuff. I think that's a great way to sort of get extras in, on a low budget movie.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Smart.
They'll love it as well. I bet there's people with screenshots saved for when it comes up in conversation that they were in Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, right, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. John and Bernie, who run the Winchester, these are the real names of the landlord and landlady who used to run Simon Pegg's own local pub, which is the Shepherds in Highgate. It's true that John of the Shepherds in Highgate used to make toasted sandwiches for regulars, hence the reference to the Breville out the back.
That's brilliant.
Simon Pegg and Nick Frost were also regular attendees of the Shepherds Thursday night quiz, hence the line, "We do the quiz." It's great. It's good. I enjoy that. When they run into their alternate gang, and as they make their way to the Winchester, there are a couple of comedy partnerships that appear. Obviously, Pegg and Haynes, who are Tim and Daisy from Spaced, Lucy Davis and Martin Freeman, who are Dawn and Tim from The Office, Dylan Moran and Tamsin Gregg, who are Bernard and Fran from Black Books, and apparently Julia Deakin and Nick Frost, both obviously from Spaced, also as Marsha and Mike, but that one's a little less, that's a little more tenuous, that one, but yeah. When asked by an interviewer why they chose to have moving zombies instead of running zombies, which had become a bit of a trend this time in cinema, zombie movies were moving towards, because of 28 Days Later mostly, towards fast-moving zombies. Simon Pegg's response was brilliant. It was, because death is not an energy drink.
That's very good.
It's a really good way to combat that. It was the trend at the time, and I'm glad they avoided it. I don't have a problem with fast-moving zombies if that's your movie. If that's the choice you want to make to give more tension, that your zombies can move quickly. But there is something to be said for the classic shambling hordes, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Shaun tells Liz that he's going to take her to the place that does all the fish, but when he but when he opens the phone book, you can see that the restaurant is literally called Full Cheese Restaurant, the place that does all the fish.
So it doesn't even sound like that fancy a restaurant.
No, it doesn't. But again, I think that's good because that hits with the point of the movie, which is that it's not about being good at doing stuff, it's just about being willing to step outside and do different things. The garden scenes were originally a lot longer, featuring a hanged man zombie and a woman being eaten by her own dog. They even intended the dog to be played by the dog that was Colin, the dog in Spaced, but that didn't end up happening for whatever reason, budget, or just they thought it was unnecessary to the pacing of the movie. Unclear, but that's probably what happened. So, this is a fun one. A lot of the voices that you hear in news television reports towards the end of the movie and in the middle of the movie are famous people. So, David Walliams is on a news broadcast. Mark Gatiss is on the radio. Keith Chegwin is obviously hosting the Fun Dead program. Rob Brydon is the one voicing Zombies from Hell, the show. And the voice at the end dismissing the infected monkeys as a cause, that voice is Edgar Wright himself. So there you go. Lots of little cameos. So at one point, I love this one so much. At one point, a zombie appears in a yellow cycling helmet and lycra shorts. This zombie is played by comedian Michael Smiley. Now, if anyone is not familiar with this, Michael Smiley appeared in Spaced as a bicycle courier named Tyres. And the outfit that the zombie is dressed in is the same, suggesting that's the same character, now a zombie, which I enjoy.
Nice. Very nice.
The rifle they use in the Winchester is obviously an actual Winchester, a model 66. It is the same weapon used in Night of the Living Dead and the 90s remake of Night of the Living Dead. I was going to say, and Night of the Living Dead, both movies, and then I hovered over it. And so one is the original 1968 Night of the Living Dead, and one is, of course, the 1990 remake of Night of the Living Dead. So there you go. Even though, according to
it really is a treasure trove, then, for fans of the genre.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. And as someone who went through a real... funnily enough, I went through my zombie kick not way later, but later than this. It was, I think, the year of uni that we met, I had a real mad, 6 months of just consuming zombie movies. I just got really into it. And I'd seen this prior. So I only appreciate some of this stuff and some of these tropes later on. Yeah, so it's a shame that I didn't have that in my back pocket when I watched it originally. But I still obviously enjoyed the movie. The movie really works, regardless of your understanding of the zombie genre.
Yeah,
there's
for sure it does.
Tons of stuff, specifically the George A. Romero stuff, which clearly was the biggest influence. Because obviously George A. Romero is not the only man who made zombie movies, but obviously George A. Romero's stuff is all like the most iconic. So you've sort of, it's natural. Everything is inspired by that. I think that makes a lot of sense. Even the stuff that's not that is inspired by that. I mean, even movies like 28 Days Later, wouldn't exist without what Romero did. So yeah. And you want to talk about a movie franchise with an unwieldy mythology? The Night of the Living Dead series is a nightmare to follow. Anyway, so even though, okay, I'm gonna read this and just see if I can make sense of this. So even though according to the Zombometer feature, that must be a feature on the DVD. So in the DVD, there's a Zombometer feature, which apparently clarifies that Diane definitely dies. The DVD also features an animated special feature called What Happened to Diane When She Left the Winchester, that explains that Diane makes it through the crowd of zombies, climbs a tree, passes out, awakens to utter silence, and out of fear, stays in the tree for days, surviving on David's severed leg. That's gross. She eventually goes on to... Go on.
Oh, that is grim.
Yeah.
Yeah, she'd have to cook that, wouldn't she?
Oh, you could live on it without cooking it. You'd get sick, but you'd have sustenance. She eventually goes on to live with an aunt and remains in Christmas card contact with Shaun and Liz following the events of the zombie day.
God,
it's brutal, yeah. According to the DVD commentary, when Ed attempts to cheer Shaun up at the Winchester with plans of binge drinking, he's actually summarising the events of their next day entirely in drinking references. Bloody Mary obviously refers to the checkout girl in the back garden. Bite at the King's Head, that's Philip. Couple, David and Di. Little Princess, Liz. And Staggerback, the zombies, I guess. And then Bar for Shots, obviously firing the rifle at the Winchester. So that's fun. Again, this movie's foreshadowing is fucking bananas. Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright initially considered an actual true sequel, not a spiritual sequel, that would replace the zombies with another monster. They decided against it as they were pleased with this movie as a standalone product and thought too many characters died really to continue the story. But the proposed title was From Dusk Till Dawn, which implies...
Nice. That's very good.
Which would have presumably been a vampire movie. However, this idea did end up having a weird little afterlife, as a poster for From Dusk Till Dawn appears in Into the Spider-Verse as a movie that really did get made in Miles Morales' universe.
Oh, that's cool. That's a nice touch.
Yeah. So in some alternate universe, they ended up making From Dusk Till Dawn. So this movie cost $4 million to make, which sounds like a lot of money. But in the grand scheme of movies, that might be one of the lowest budget movies we've ever reviewed on this podcast. $4 million is peanuts compared to everything else that we talked about. I mean, even last week...
I don't know. It must have had a bigger budget than The Parole Officer, surely.
Oh, I'd forgot about The Parole Officer. Yes, that's a fair point. Actually, and this isn't in the trivia, but I did notice, I don't know if you clocked, Chris, Shaun has a Battle Royale poster in his room.
Oh, nice.
Which is
I didn't clock that.
Which is a movie we have reviewed. So $4 million is a pretty small budget. It's a really good question. Let's find out. Parole Officer. Let's see. Budget. Parole Officer budget. $6 million.
Oh wow. Well, I guess Coogan was a massive name, to be fair.
The Parole Officer cost more money than Shaun of the Dead. That's fucked.
I don't think it looks like it costs more money than
No,
Shaun
it doesn't.
of the Dead.
It absolutely doesn't. And they weren't made that, time-wise. Same era, right? Similar era.
I suppose there's some towards the end.
Just 3 years earlier.
I suppose, to be fair, there's bigger set pieces in Parole Officer, isn't there? If you think about the end, especially.
Yeah, I guess so. Oh yeah, there's like a car chase and stuff, isn't there?
Well, and all the wire work and stuff like that.
Yeah, there you go. So this might be the lowest budget movie we've done, because even last week we did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Well, that was like 10 or 20 million, something like that. So that wasn't a big budget movie either.
Something like that. I think it was around 20. Yeah.
Yeah. So and yet compared to this, 4 million. So at some point I'll have a look through and I'll see if I can find something that was made on a lower budget than this. But in terms of bang for your buck, the movie grossed 30 million worldwide at the box office, and then obviously went on to be a massive hit after cinema, via DVD and VHS and reruns and stuff. So the movie is more than made its budget back, to say the least. Even in the cinema it made 30 million, which is a lot more than the 4 spent to make it. Go on, you've gone
for sure.
quiet.
I'm just seeing something. Are we? No, even then it's the same amount, but adjusted for inflation. No, Lady and the Tramp, but Lady and the Tramp is $4 million, so it's still
right. And 4 million again, as you said, adjusted for inflation, would be more money. Therefore,
yeah.
So that was what year was Lady and the Tramp made?
Lady and the Tramp was 1955.
Right. So yeah. One second. Let me just. I'm curious. Let's do the math on that. Yes, I accept your recommended cookies. Jesus. You said 1955, yeah?
Yeah.
So 1955.
Oh, that's a good one.
4. Wait, what? Oh, wait. This is not going well. This inflation calculator is... I've got myself mixed up. Here we go. Show amount. 85 million.
Jeez.
That's
I found
crazy.
another one that's close. But even that. So Donnie Darko, $4.5 million.
Oh, that's a good... Yeah, that's a good thought. Donnie Darko would have been a good answer. Yeah. Not quite, but still very close. Yeah.
Nope, not quite.
So
yeah, maybe it is. Keep going with the triv, and I'll keep having a
well,
look
the last piece of trivia is just to clarify, obviously, that this is the first of a sort of unofficial sequel trilogy known as the Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy. We already kind of covered this, but the red wrapper strawberry flavored makes its appearance in this movie, which the red represents the blood and the zombies, which is the main motif for his other movies, Hot Fuzz, Blue and Vanilla, which represents the police, and then the final part, World's End, is the green peppermint with chocolate chips, which represents the science fiction extraterrestrial elements, the green, which is what those movies are. Then with Cars Exist, Chris. This one's interesting. So the 1996 Renault, which is Sean's car, is hotly debated, Chris, as to whether it is a... there's two kinds of Renault it could be, and I've only written down one of them. That's annoying. A Renault Megane or a Renault... What was the other kind of car? Oh, that's annoying. I must have accidentally closed that page down. The Internet Movie Car Database. Let's quickly bring it back up. Sorry, everyone. I had it in front of me, and I think at some point I've closed the tab without realising. I had it written in my notes also, but I forgot that one detail.
Dude,
because basically they've removed the badges, basically, so you can't tell what kind of car it is necessarily. So there's the Renault Megane, which is what a lot of people think it is. Some people, though, think this is because when they've looked up the license plate on that car, the license is registered to a Ford Focus, not a Renault Megane. But because the badge is removed, it's a bit weird because you can't really, yeah. So, but apparently it's the Renault Megane, is what the comments are saying.
Okay, nice. I've just realised we're utter morons. So I'm here. I'm looking it up. Donnie Darko, 4.5. Drop Dead Gorgeous, 15 million for that. Rent a Kid, no budget listed. Batman, Master the Phantasm, $6 million. Memento, 5 to 9 million. But we are utter morons. Of course, it's not the lowest budget movie we've done on Rewind Reviews.
Go on.
You're gonna be annoyed with yourself.
Well, I don't know, because if it's the snowman, I'm going to pull that up as that's not a movie. Go on.
No, it's a movie, and it's a movie where we discussed the budget a lot.
Oh my god, we did
ago.
it 2 movies ago. Christ.
Clerks is obviously the lowest budget movie we're
27
probably
grand.
ever going to do.
You fuck me. I hope listeners were shouting that the entire time we were having this discussion.
Yeah, I really hope they. When I realised, I was like, "Oh, we're fucking idiots." Like we literally discussed the budget
so far back. The thing is, if we'd done Clerks in season 1, fair enough. We'd forgotten we'd done Clerks, mate. We did it 2 episodes ago. That's embarrassing.
That's mad.
That's great. All right, there's one other bit of Cars Exist trivia. The Jag, Phillips car, is a 1986 Jaguar Sovereign, a V12. It's a Series 3. So the guys on the Internet Movie Car Database have looked into this car, Chris, and we've got some information. So first of all, based on the data you can get when you search its registration, it wasn't green when it was originally purchased. It was silver. Someone repainted it green. But then there's this comment. Now, this comment is fucking amazing. So this is from somebody called Lovejoy's Datsun, and they left this comment in 2009. So the comment is fairly old, at this point, but relevant. This Jag is now dead. The story goes like this. A few years ago, I went to a friend's who does banger racing, and he had a silver Jag that had clearly been repainted green at some point. I said it looked too good to race, and that's when he told me he got it from London, and it had been used in a film, but he couldn't remember what the film was called. He also said it had some random scripts in the boot, but he'd put them on fire and burnt them along with the interior, thinking it wasn't worth anything, and that was before this film was even in cinemas. Then I saw the film and realised where this Jag was used.
Oh, God.
So the Jag got burnt out from the inside by some lunatic that did banger racing. What a shame, because it's a beautiful Jag. It's a nice car. I would never be caught dead driving a Jag myself, but that's a different issue.
Yeah, but I'd also argue burning a Jag of any kind is, you know what I mean? Like,
yep. Wow, it's a Jag, So that is the end of the trivia. Thanks everyone for listening. I guess we've got to clarify what we're doing next week before we wrap this bad boy up. Or do you want to? Yeah, we do. Do we say what we're doing next week before we do the where you can find us stuff? I can't remember. How do you podcast?
Yeah,
Chris?
we tend to. We do. Yeah, where are we going next week, Dan? Because Dan, once again, yes. Clerks, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Shaun of the Dead, all potential beginnings of trilogies.
Yep.
Where, but you've got a dilemma because next week is the Christmas slot. So
of
Dan,
course.
Where are we going next?
So Chris, the next film that we're going to do, it's a buddy cop film. It's full of action as our comedically mismatched heroes unravel a conspiracy. It is, of course, that famous Christmas film, Lethal Weapon. I was so proud of this choice, Chris, because it allowed me to both tease that it might be Hot Fuzz, while also not at all being Hot Fuzz, while also being the start of a trilogy.
Is it a Christmas movie particularly as well?
Yes.
I've got nowhere to go.
It's a Shane Black movie. Your move, fucker. Of course it's a Christmas movie.
I've got nowhere to go because it's really pushing it to say that the first 3 Home Alones are a separate trilogy.
Oh no, that is exactly what you should do. That's the answer. You've given it away. That's a perfect answer.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Because it's as much of a trilogy
as
Richard Donner directed as Lethal Weapon. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's a new Lethal Weapon movie coming?
Jesus, is there really? Weren't they too old?
There's been talk of it.
Weren't they too old for this shit back when the first one came out?
Yeah, I guess Home Alone is. I'm not gonna say, but Home Alone is. Home Alone is the logical answer, isn't it? But
Because that's a Christmas
see what
movie that
happens when
could
we
also
get
be
there.
the start of a trilogy. Because we've done the Santa Claus. But yeah,
I
I
love
thought
this
you'd be.
bit.
I thought you'd be
I
proud
love
of
this
my
bit
choice.
so much.
What I was most
Yeah.
proud of is that I picked a movie that, when I described it, could sound like Hot Fuzz.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, because I was gonna do that with. I was gonna choose Spider-Man, but I thought Spider-Man really wasn't Christmassy, and that one would.
I think
couldn't do the two.
we would have to do that. We would have to have done that as a trilogy. I've always imagined us doing those three together. They're a fascinating trilogy. All in all, great movie. Obviously, go see Shaun of the Dead. If you're in the New Cross Gate area in London, head over to see the former Duke of Albany pub that closed in 2005, converted into residential accommodation now. To look at the Winchester. Go do that. It's fun. I'm actually. Oh no, this is more for another podcast. So a little peek behind the curtain. We're also doing a Nothing But Lyrics today on the song "Just" by Radiohead, and in sort of looking into that song a little bit yesterday before we're recording, and just glancing at the video again, because the video will end up being a bit relevant to the discussion. It's made me want to visit Liverpool Street in London where the video was shot. So at some point I'm probably going to do that soon. So yeah, visiting locations is fun. Anyway, thanks everyone. You can get us all the usual places. You can go to patreon.com/nothingbutstatic if you want to support us financially. You're welcome to join in there. That gives you access to this podcast a week early. So if you want to hear us discuss Lethal Weapon right now, patreon.com/nothingbutstatic UK will allow you to do that. And then of course, the Discord. The place where you can chat. The place where we can all come together and talk about how weird it was that I chose to take the podcast on the road for really no benefit this week. Other than that, I found it funny. But yeah, you can definitely do that over by joining if you join the Patreon, you get access to the Discord. And of course, Nothing But Lyrics, our bonus podcast, is available there too. If you want to communicate with us, there's plenty of ways you can do it. If you've got any thoughts based on any of the stuff we talked about, mail@nothingbutstatic.co.uk will get to us. Of course, we're no longer doing Twitter really, but you're welcome to put comments on the video version of this on the YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/nothingbutstaticuk. In fact, while we're there, that is one of the other ways you can support us that isn't with money. You can like and subscribe to any of our sort of output on any of the platforms that you've got available to you. So if you go over to Spotify, you can and review the podcast there. Same on iTunes, any of those formats, you do that. The more you do that, the more it tells the various algorithms you enjoyed it, the more likely it makes those algorithms to share with other people. Of course, you can do that directly. You have a friend who loves Shaun of the Dead, might find this podcast interesting, send them our way. Let them know. Rewind reviews. It's out there. Although, of course, the other main way you can keep supporting us is to just keep listening. We love people doing that. Keep doing that. We love you.
We're very grateful.
Very, very grateful.
We love you.
There you go. I think is that everything?
I think so. And we are about 30 seconds away, I reckon, from one file. So I'm going to say, as in keeping the recording into one audio file. So in that case, I'm going to say...
That makes me slightly worried, because I've got us as being 5 minutes away from that.
Well, I'll be honest with you, Dan. I don't really know what the cut-off point is.
It's 2 hours. 2 hours and 4 minutes.
Okay. Well, do you want to go visit another film location and add another 5, or?
Let's see which ones are near me.
I've been Chris Willingham.
I've been Dan Doolan.
And this review has been Rewound.